Hello everyone, welcome to Cafe IO. In today's video, we'll talk about a book and a concept called building a second brain. Now, this is an idea that I've been exploring for quite some time, and we'll talk about what it is and why it is very important for everyone to be aware about it. If you read a lot, if you are a learning junkie like me, then this is a concept you really need to understand. This is based off this book called Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte and is an amazing read. I recommend everyone, take a look at it. But what I've done is I've finished reading the book and I've summarized it in the form of a mind map, and we'll take a look at that. Right? So let's start. So there's two notions that we need to really understand. I've been struggling with the problem that as I read and as this reading progresses, there is this challenge of retainment, right? So if you read 3-4 books in a month or 2 months, then at the end of 2 months you have finished reading, but you are left with the problem of what have you really learned from the first book or the second book, because our memories tend to be very short and our attention span seems to be shorter as time progresses. So that's the fundamental problem. And the second and overarching problem is, how do I retain information for using it later? Let's say when I'm writing, when I'm doing creative stuff like, video creation and stuff like that. So for instance, when I was trying to read this book, I decided that instead of just sticking to highlighting in the book, I would also externalize the ideas. And this is my effort towards talking about that. So this is a summary of the book, not an exhaustive review. I have just tried to consolidate the ideas and talk about important things. So the first challenge is the problem of attention. Really, what is happening is there's tons of information overload all around us. We read blogs, we read tweets, we watch YouTube videos, we read books, articles, newsletters, RSS feeds, you name it, there's tons of information. So there's an information overload that most of us suffer. And also as we progress, our attention span is decreasing. So that's also something that we have to be aware of. And as you grow older or as you age, your ability to retain information also degrades with time. And then there are some ideas which are mind expanding. You really want to go deeper into that. There's a new subject you are reading and stuff like that, and you really want to figure out what's the best way to learn that, memorize that. So then comes a notion of why should we externalize this, and why to store it in a separate place. The first and foremost is make your ideas concrete. That's really very critical. It's a critical concept, because when you externalize it, like I've put it in the form of a mind map, it just stays with time, right? It also shows new association between ideas. For instance, when I was doing this, I started with a different node structure and then I realized this makes more sense. So in a way, newer associations are also formed when you externalize it. And then your ideas incubate over time also, because we all have recency bias. And this externalization of ideas and concepts take care of the recency bias. It also helps to sharpen perspective. So that's in a nutshell why we should externalize. There's a lot of things that we can talk about, but I just want to quickly try and summarize the book. One line which really stuck me is, you really want a second brain to not just have a memory, right? It's not just for having a place for storing information. It's actually using it as a thinking tool so that you can look at it, apply your cognitive ability, make new connections, make new logic, deductions and stuff like that. So organizing the information, building a capture and retrieval system, and then there's the notion of commonplace book, which we'll talk about. So the way this mind map I've broken down is into nodes, and just emphasized a little bit about nodes and knowledge management, and we'll get into knowledge management slightly later. But let's just talk about nodes, right? What are nodes? We are all familiar with the notion of nodes. We have all taken notes when we were in schools. So what are nodes? Nodes are really the building block of knowledges. They have a standalone value, they have an intrinsic value, and they can be usually combined to make something bigger, like an article, like a report, maybe establish a relationship. And notes are, in multiple formats. Some people like to take visual notes, some people like to just highlight, there's annotation, there's quotes. A lot of people collect good quotes, but the question comes back is, how do you have a system that can help you remember them at the right time? And then you can always use apps which keeps your note a little informal, give you a multimedia flavor. There's always open-ended nature to it, and then try to make it action oriented. Now we'll talk about action oriented very soon. So now let's go to knowledge management, which is the core of this. And at the heart of this, there are two systems at place. One is called the code method and the other is called para method, both of which we'll try and take a look at in detail. All right, just let me remove this. I don't know why I have it here. Cool. So the first idea is that for knowledge management, we require three things. One is the ability to remember them, second is the ability to connect them, and the third is the ability to create them. First method that we want to talk about is called code method. It's an acronym, it's called CODE. It stands for capture, organize, distill, and express. The idea is really simple. So we'll look at capture and focus on capturing what resonates. Now there's thoughts that can help you decide whether to capture something or not, and there's two interesting notions. One is a 12 favorite problem, which was given by Richard Feynman, and you can read about it and look about it. It's essentially an idea that, at all times keep a list of 12. The number isn't that important. Keep a list of some problems that you're tackling, and when you read something, when you get a new information, try to bounce off those concepts and see if the new idea or notion is really fitting into one of these buckets. So that's really important. Second way to look at capturing is, does the article or does the note really inspire you? Is it going to be useful? Is it maybe personal or surprising, or does it resonate with something that you have done? Is it connected to something that you have been doing? Is it contradictory to something that you have been doing, and things like that? So there can be multiple criteria, but the intent is capture. Now, how do you capture? Everybody has their own methods. For instance, I recently got these flashcards. These are small pieces of paper, 3 by 5 inches, and I intend to do a lot of physical notes from now on, apart from digital ones, because I love the feel of paper, and I'm one of those people who prefer to read it in a book instead of in a digital format. So I want to make note taking a little more personal, and I'm kind of building my own mini note library there. The second is organize, and we'll park this for now. What Tiago recommends is save for actionability, and the whole book talks about a method called para, which will just go on very quickly. It's more of a folder structure layout that he describes, and we'll take a look at that. The third is really the idea of distilling. Now this to me was I was kind of aware of everything before this, nothing new, just a very structured way of talking about the same things, which made me think a little deeper into these areas. But distilling is really the art, right? There's some great quotes that I was able to pick from the book, like prune the good to surface the great, or to attain knowledge, add things every day; to attain wisdom, remove things every day. And in a nutshell, in order to distill, he talks about finding the essence. And then there are ways to do it. One method is called progressive summarization, and it's basically a top-down effort, or a top-down way to arrive at an information. So let's say you have read 4 chapters and you have 40 highlights. The first step is those 40 highlights. The second step is highlights of those highlights, and the third step is highlights of those highlights. And then you effectively go on, and maybe you are able to distill each chapter into a couple of lines as to what you have learned from the chapter. What's the essence of the chapter? What's the key takeaway from the chapter? Sometimes it's easier to arrive at that, sometimes it's very difficult. And I found a really beautiful image in the book, which I want to showcase. Now this is an image from Pablo Picasso, and so nothing to be taken lightly. Now if you see, these are 11 lithographs that Picasso used to effectively generate a skeletal of a bull. Now these are a sequence of images, and he drew to study bull's essential form. And what Picasso is doing is using a process of distillation in art, right? In drawings or in art, I would say that. And what Picasso has really done is he has showcased each step, and as you see, progressively you have added sometimes more detail. But as after third, number three, the number third is probably the most complete picture, which kind of is bloated. It's almost three-dimensional and stuff. And then after that, if you see, he's progressively trying to diminish and effectively arrive at something which is number 11, which is just a very raw skeletal of how a bull looks. So that's what is effectively a distillation process, and I really like this idea of distillation, and it got me really thinking around it. The next on the code method is after capture, organize, distill is express. So most of us don't express, and I think that's extremely important process to do that. When you learn something, what I have discovered over my experiences are the best way to learn something is to teach them. So when you write about an information that you have learned, when you talk about it, and that's part of the motivation why I make YouTube videos. And so when you document what you have written, when you teach about what you have learned, that really helps out. And express from this book really got me thinking to move from a perfectionist view of having the best version of the article or the content to have the first cut of it. And that's something which was a bit of hard hitting for me, because I usually try to, when I write, I usually try to make it perfect and not follow a beta or a pilot approach as we do in very software development. So to summarize it up, what the message is: showcase your work in a minimum viable product version fashion, and use what you have, even if you think it's meager, and it could be magic in your hands. And then you can always use your second brain to help you resurface information. Now the next method is para method. What this is mostly a folder structure. The way he says to organize, and this is probably the heart of the book. If you search Google, you will find tons of information about para method. Some of the parallels are Zettelkasten, note taking, smart notes, etc. I'm also going to do videos about them in the future. But para method stands for projects, areas, resource, archive, and these are so the first is most actionable, the last is least actionable. So projects are short-term efforts in your life that you are working on now. These are time-bound. These have to be time-bound for them to qualify as a project. For instance, writing an article, publishing a video, finishing a journal, maybe you're working on a code, or you're working on a module. Any of these could be projects. Areas are more like long-term responsibilities that you manage, how you manage finance. So for example, if I have to think of and then let's cover this. And resources are topics or interests. So these are more like knowledge banks that some of us acquire. There's other method, and archive is pretty much everything that doesn't fit in these areas. So para method is one way of organizing folders. A lot of people follow topic-based method. For example, they'll put in maths, they'll put in science and stuff like that. And usually the problem that Tiago talks about is that this approach, the approach of capturing by genre or capturing by subject, is not actionable. And what I think is quite right when he talks about that, unless you are a student. And for students, I think Zettelkasten works better. But if you're a professional, if you're a creative person, then I think this method works better, or a combination of the two which I'm trying to implement could work better. So para is that. So let's take an example. So let's go from top down. So losing 10 pounds could be a project. Health is an area. Nutrition guide is a resource, and lose 5 pounds is a completed project that I did. So let's say the goal is, if you think from an atomic habits perspective, let's say the goal is to lose 30 pounds. I started with 5 pounds, which I completed with the help of certain areas. There's information in my area, there's information in my resources, and then I've completed that. Now I'm motivated to do losing 10 pounds. Not really a personal example, but that could be a way. Another way to look at it would be finances, right? Doing taxes for 2023 could be a project, while finance could be an area, and then resources could be your bank statements, stuff like that. An archive could be anything you want to throw at it. Basically, archive is, when the way he talks about is take a note, take a conversation, and in your projects, The idea is those 12 problems that I talked about, they will come and somewhere sit along with side, because those are also part of your projects. So take a note and look at it. Does it fit a project? Yes, great. If not, go to area. Does it fit an area? Great. If not, put it in an resource. If it doesn't fit anything, you archive it. One thing which he talks about is not to delete information, and there isn't really a need to delete any information these days. So that's another good thought to put. So that's what I had in a nutshell about this book and the concept building a second brain. It's a really an exciting area. I am kind of using this tool heptabase to build up my second brain itself. Future videos, if you like, if you want to have videos around this, I'll talk about that in the future. Till then, Akash signing off. Bye bye everyone.